So here's the thing. A lot of guys are not afraid to choose the wrong thing. They're afraid of missing the one thing that will make them truly happy. They think that is their calling. But what we are here at the All In Podcast to talk about today is what happens if you don't know your calling? What happens if you're worried that the thing you're about to choose isn't the thing that you are being called to? We are going to dive into all of that here today at the All In Podcast. Don't go anywhere. All right, gentlemen, welcome back. Good to have everybody here.
It's good to be here.
Little knucks around here. There you go. So we're talking about calling.
Mm-hmm.
What is your calling in life? And for many guys who are afraid of the reality of missing their calling, I think sometimes we put on an additional weight on our shoulders to choose the right thing, but sometimes that's not necessary in certain decisions. So what are some times in y'all's lives that you feel like the decision felt way heavier or more important than it actually was?
I am notorious for being indecisive because anything will give me paralysis because I'm thinking ahead of like, how is everything. This morning, I didn't have time to drink any coffee. We stopped at a gas station to pick up a little caffeine. If we weren't in a time crunch, I could have spent 10 minutes thinking about which energy drink is going to allow me to have the best day and is going to lead to fulfillment.
Which energy drink am I being called to?
Yeah, which a white Monster for the most part, but that's the level of ball that I'm playing on a daily basis is just getting stuck in the smallest things and dramatizing them into thinking that they're the most important things of all time. On a more like to what you're actually asking, I think one of the heaviest decisions that in the time, the heaviest decisions I made, but looking back, I'm like, that doesn't really, like, I don't know if it would have had any sort of impact on anything, was when I was deciding on my fifth year at A&M. It was a lot of like, well, I could do summer classes and like graduate in August, or I could take classes in the fall and pack myself with like 15 hours or spread them out amongst 2 semesters. And I went back and forth for months. And I thought that if I didn't do the right thing, it was going to lead to me not finding the right job, to me not finding the right spouse, to me potentially going to heaven or hell. Like I thought everything
it escalated very quickly.
Like I was just so I couldn't think about anything else but on did I want to do a fifth year or not, and to what extent. So it didn't have to do with the calling, but I made it have to do about a calling. Clayton, what about you?
What you're describing, Jose, is the cross of the melancholic soul.
Yeah.
So Michael can relate. He's married to a melancholic.
Oh, I have a group called the Married to Melancholic Support Group.
It's brutal because I'm the exact same way as you, which is just that every single decision, big or small, I just mull over and over and over and over, and it gives me anxiety of like, what if I choose the wrong thing, and what are the repercussions of this going to be, or just like thinking about my life, well, what if this and what if this and what if this. And so
it took me 2 weeks to decide how much RAM I wanted my laptop to have.
I can relate to that. We have a good friend, Jonathan, and we do the same thing where it's like, even I've talked about my task manager, Todoist, on here before, and him and I talk about all the time about how when we're making a purchase, it's like we'll have 3 options, whether it's downloading one app versus another, or which water bottle am I going to get, and I go through hundreds of reviews trying to decide, which one of these things is going to be the best possible thing that I could buy. And it's just like, dude, it's a water bottle.
I
the one I have is antimicrobial.
Going through different colors of the wallets until I landed on this one.
You tried every single straw in the store.
I held them all against my hand, seeing how they would go with my skin tone, up against my clothes, which one would look better with my black backpack. I tried it all.
You know who's not like this?
Who?
John Michael.
Nope. I think about decisions 2 weeks after I make them.
That's exactly right.
That's how I've lived my life. And to be honest, when I'm with people, and I swear I'm not talking about y'all, just to be clear, other people who are just like, I don't know what to do. I'm just like, just do something. And then if you made the wrong decision, you can just correct it and go back. But I think the action-oriented side of me, that is a gift at times. I've also made a lot of poor decisions because I've jumped into something without actually thinking it through. I'm wondering if for men and maybe for ladies as well, is the fear of missing their calling more of a fear of missing out, or is it a prudence of choosing the right thing? Is it, I want to take more time, this is so important, I really want to make the right decision here? Or is it more, I have a paralysis of decision because I'm afraid I'm going to choose the wrong thing?
Well, I think, it can be both. I mean, honestly, I could stand to be a little bit more like you, and you could stand to be probably a little bit more like me in situations, and so I would say up to a certain point, there's a healthiness in, sitting back and evaluating decisions from perhaps a practical standpoint, and then also evaluating decisions from a prayerful standpoint as well. But then at some point you got to make a decision, and I don't necessarily know where that line in the sand is, but my tendency is to go over that line. And once you go over that line, then your, evaluations of your decisions become more motivated by fear than they do about prudence, I would say.
Do you think that the idea of a calling people think of as like this one specific road that I need to go down? And so that maybe stresses them out, is like, all right, there's 6 different ways to get to that destination, but my calling has to only be one of those things.
Yeah, I would say so. I know, at least in my own life, most of the times where I'm afraid to make a decision or paralyzed is because I forget that there are many different ways to get to that point in time and space, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I think we could all use that reminder more often. I know whenever I am reminded of that by my friends, people like you, John Michael, that's like, hey, there's a lot of ways to get there. Like, it's okay. I think that's when it's like, oh, you're right. And this decision, maybe it's still a big decision. Don't get me wrong, but it's a lot easier to take and be like, oh, okay, if I make a mistake, it's going to be okay. Because there's 15 million different roads that are going to lead to the same destination. But I've convinced myself that there is each of these 6 options in front of me, each lead to complete opposite directions, and there's no crossover. And that's why I get paralyzed.
Is that, I'm wondering too, for people, is it that when, like, let's say you're making a decision on a job, right? We're all at a point of our lives where, we've either made decisions for job and career, or we're kind of in that stage of our life where we're kind of looking ahead and thinking about that. And there's so many different factors, right? There's pay, there's city, there's lifestyle. Is it remote? Is it not? There's coworkers, there's leadership structures, there's industry. Am I going to like that industry? Am I not? So when you're making a decision like a job, you have 16 different factors that you're looking at. And what's the compensation package? And do they send me a laptop? And all these things. And I'm wondering if maybe some of that paralysis is, instead of focusing on 3 key objectives in that 16 item list of things that you want, you're trying to find that perfect one that checks every single box for your lifestyle, for your compensation, for your city, for your time. And I'm wondering if when you lack that high of a level of clarity, if that's what trips people up. They want to know, I want to see everything on paper before I make a decision. And I'm curious if that's ever even possible, to know how that's going to work out for you before you jump into it.
I mean, I can relate to that, just because I think that, in a lot of my decisions, there's like a compulsive need for security. There's like a fear that, a decision that I make is going to lead to some form of insecurity in my life. And so before I take a step in something, a step in a direction towards something, I want to know that I'm going to land and be completely fine. And that's just not the reality of our life here on this earth, in our exile on this pilgrimage, is that, we have to put one foot in front of the other and sometimes not really see the full picture all of the time, and just trust that God is going to provide for us. And that's something that I think that, I need to grow in day by day.
Absolutely. It's funny. I feel like as I'm sitting here, the last however long we've been talking, I'm like, yeah, I definitely get like that when it comes to small decisions. Like when it comes to like what color is my water bottle going to be, I could sit for hours trying to decide. Like when my wife's like, hey, what do you want to go eat for a date night? Like, poof, that is one of the hardest questions you could ever ask me. But when it comes to like big decisions, I'm a lot more like you in that sense, where I'm like, I think there's a point for me where it crosses like there's too many variables, whereas now I'm just going to go with my gut and hope for the best.
Yeah, live with the consequences.
But when it comes to like less variables, I want to examine every single variable like under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm just like, yeah, I don't know, because I keep going back and forth. When it comes to my fifth year at A&M, I knew it wasn't that big of a deal maybe, and that's why I molded over so much that it became a big deal. But when it comes to what do I want to do, after a couple years in a job, I'm a lot more likely to be like, oh, I know what I want to do. I'm going to go do this.
Do you think that as you've inherited more and more responsibilities in your life, that you have become quicker to make decisions or more fearful to make decisions?
What do you think?
I think the biggest decision that all of us have ever had to make is the decision to propose to our now wives. And that was something that in the dating world, in the pre-engagement world, and even during engagement, that can just bring up a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And talking to a lot of people, that's really, really normal, to feel that way, because you're making a decision, honestly, that at that point in my life when I was 22, I didn't feel like I had the authority to make. It's like I just graduated college. I have no idea what's going on in my life, no. And so I would say, once you start making big decisions like that and you see that all things work together for good for those who love God, there's a greater freedom there.
Yeah.
And I think too, I was thinking of the line from the Easter Vigil, "Oh happy fault, oh what is it? Oh glorious sin of Adam, that won for us so great a Redeemer." That God works good in all things, and perhaps there are certain times in our life where there's great clarity of like there is this one specific path, there is this one specific decision that I feel like God is calling me in this direction. But then we also have to remember that God gives us a lot of freedom as well to use our own human reason to make a decision. And then even in the midst of that, using our reason to make pros and cons lists and to figure out, what's better, A, B, C, or D. And then also trust that, what, even if I do make the wrong decision here, I have a good Father who loves me and is gonna, like just thinking of our children make poor decisions all the time, and we snatch them up, out of that. But we also want to give them, freedom to make those decisions as well, and just know that we're going to support them along the way.
Reminds me of there's a quote by Saint Augustine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys say Augustine or
Gus?
you say Augustine.
Daddy.
Or Augustine.
Augustine.
Augustine. I did too.
Smart people.
As well. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. He has a quote that is, "Love God and do whatever you please." Have you guys heard this quote?
That sounds wonderful.
Which I think gets misused a lot.
Oh, I could see
I
how
could run
that
with
would
for
be
miles.
abused.
Because it's like, oh yeah, I totally love God. But I think there's a second part to that quote that people forget, which is, "Love God and do whatever you please. For the soul trained in love to God will do nothing to offend the one who is beloved."
Yeah.
Right. And I think
that
kind of
second
goes with,
sentence is really important.
It's really important.
huge. But that goes to kind of what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
which that has allowed me a lot of freedom when it comes to the bigger decisions and maybe you know what I was saying of like the bigger decisions don't cost me as much stress, because part of me knows like, okay, I have to trust my formation.
Mm-hmm.
I have to trust that, okay, I'm in a state of grace. I pray daily. I go to mass as much as I can. Not daily, but I try. You know, it's like I love God. I'm doing all these things. It's all now. I'm not saying that I can't sin by any means, but it's like, okay, a soul trained. What does it say? A soul trained and loved to God will do nothing to offend the one who is beloved. It's like there has to be a trust there that I'm not going to purposely do something that's going to lead my family away from salvation, as long as I'm still in these places of being in a state of grace, continuing to love God, continuing to put him as like the most important thing. If we can get those things, then it doesn't really matter where my wife and I live and raise a family.
Right.
You know, it doesn't really matter what job I have. Now, again, the other side of the coin, I think when I first heard this when I was in college, of like, oh, love God and do whatever you please. The saint said that. Great. I can do
Love
whatever
God
I want.
and
You
buy
know?
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Keep calm and chive on.
It's like, I'm going to go to the bar still 3 a.m. every day.
I love
it's
God.
fine. You know, I love God.
Yeah, I think we, you know, in my day job, I help out recruiting and hiring and retaining people to focus. And I know you guys have ample experience in recruiting people to come work for us, also recruiting people to work in different organizations or camps or apostolates or companies. And so I think we actually, you know, the All In podcast doesn't have a ton of talent, but I think if there's one area we do have a lot of talent in, it's like we are well-versed in helping people make decisions. I mean, we've done this for our day jobs the last 3-4 years of our career. And I think you guys would all say the same thing. What is the thing that frustrates you the most when you're walking with a, you know, soon to be college graduate in terms of his future?
I don't feel called.
I don't feel called. I don't feel called. And I think for their sake, I think what they're saying is I have confusion or disclarity about my direction.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I have done myself and I see in some of these young people is I won't take a step in that direction unless I feel like that is the thing I'm supposed to do. And so I won't attend an interview unless I feel like I really, really want that job. Or I won't take a step to, you know, ask a girl out unless I just know she is the one. I won't apply to this company unless I know everything about the company and I've read their mission statement and I've had coffee with the CEO and I've talked to 5 employees at the company to get their experience. And I just think that attitude, one that we can relate to certainly, is just dangerous because calling necessitates some discernment. Discernment could mean a way of thinking through something, but discernment necessitates action. You can't actually discern if something's good or bad for you without going and checking it out. And so, you know, our advice to people in our recruiting of them has always been, hey, just come get to know us a little bit. Like before you can make a decision on if you want to work for us or not, we just come and check it out. And, you know, I call it a first date. Like come and go out on a date with us.
Yeah.
And get a feel for who we are. And then you can figure out what the next step is there. Maybe it's interviewing. Great. Maybe it's you get an offer. Awesome. Well, then the next step after that is decide if you want to work for us. But don't make a decision on if you want to work for us until you know if you even have an offer to come join us.
Yeah.
And so that discernment necessitates action, and action necessitates an act of the will to go and do that thing. So use your head a little bit more, you know, don't lean into your heart nearly as much. I don't feel that it's my calling. It's like God has given you rational capabilities to think through things.
Mm-hmm.
What's the line y'all think? And I don't want to derail too much, but I think first is like, what does calling even mean?
I think what some people think it means is you're St. Paul on the way to Damascus and God knocks you off of your horse and makes it abundantly clear to you what your job is in your life. But
I'm like, I just don't know if I believe that that's a thing.
No, I'm saying I think that's the connotation people have.
Because it also implies that there's only like one, and that's it. Which
Right.
I guess is what we're talking about. If like, yeah, I don't know if I subscribe to that.
It's extremely nuanced.
Yeah.
Clayton, can you help us? What do you got?
Look, I'm like, if you love God,
yeah,
if
and you
you're
do
leading your
whatever.
family to eternal life as best as you can, if you're not leading people to sin, then it doesn't matter if you do sales, IT, you know, HR, or like whatever it is. There's no really calling.
there was something I've been thinking about as I was talking with a friend of mine recently. I was having a conversation with one of his spiritual directors, and they were talking about, you know, entering into the Christmas season. He's got 2 young children, and he's like, I want to do this, and I want to do that, I want to do this, and I want to do that. And she kind of slowed him down and was just like, you know, like all of those things are good, but it's like you're, in a lot of ways, you're trying to exit the reality of your family life to go and do these external things. And if you run away from your reality right now as a husband and father, and you know what it's like to have 2 young children at the home, and you know they're international missionaries right now, you know, visiting family back in Texas. If you run away from that, like you're gonna miss God. Like God comes to you and is present in your reality. And I think a lot of times when, you know, we're looking for a calling, you know, in a lot of ways we're looking for something, you know, out there, outside of ourselves. I have to go out there and have to find it. I have to search for it. I have to look for it, you know, and it's this complicated decision. When in reality, I think you have to take a step back and you have to look like, what's the present reality of my life? What are the circumstances that I find myself in? What are the relationships, you know, the people that are around me? You know, who are the people that I can talk to and ask questions to help me in making a decision? And I think it's, you know, again, you know, St. Augustine, you know,
Augustine.
Saint Dino, you know, he finds God within himself.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if you guys can help me there, kind of process that of looking for God elsewhere when maybe you have to take a step back. And when we're talking about, you know, recruiting and inviting young men and women to discern becoming a focused missionary, it's like, hey, you know, like maybe this isn't something that you want to do, you know, and that's totally fine. But also, like, you know, so much of your college experience and the relationships that you've had have been, you know, through relationships that you've formed because of the focused missionaries that are on your campus, you know, and maybe that's just something to look at and to consider. And I'm not trying to push anything on you or make a decision for you, but like, this has been a huge part of your life. It's worth, you know, taking a step and just looking at it at least a little bit.
Well, I think that going back to the car analogy of, you know, there's a destination, there's a couple different ways to get there. I think as we determine and define calling, there's a few non-negotiables, and we could identify some of those non-negotiables. One, to love God with your whole heart, your whole mind, and your whole self, and to treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself. Like those are some non-negotiables that are objectively your calling, that every human being who's been chosen by God, which everyone has been chosen by God, has to have as a part of their calling, to love God and to love his people. And then there's a kind of a hierarchy of loving his people. And so there's love of spouse if you're married, if you have a vocation to the priesthood or religious life, it's loving the church. That's your primary there. And then your secondary is your children, if God blesses you with those, or your spiritual children. And then your third is those whom God has entrusted to you through friendships and through your family. And so it's kind of like, all right, non-negotiables over here. Love God, love people in that order. And then you kind of move to the negotiables of job, career, location, all of those things. And so as you're looking at the negotiables of life, and then you have the non-negotiables of life, which is probably, we would define that as the destination. You look at these things and you see, okay, there's like 6 to 8 to 10 to 15 roads that I could take to get to that same thing. And that is where things get difficult, because you know the non-negotiables. And I think a lot of our listeners, us, may be clear on those. What they're unclear on is the 8 different roads to take. And maybe the advice I would give there is some of those roads may be more predisposed to helping the negotiables than others. And so as you look at those things, you may find some of those avenues allow for you to be more free to take care of your obligations to God and to his people. And so you should lean hard to discovery of those maybe as kind of your primary. And then sometimes people aren't called to those things. Let's talk about career for an example. You know, some people have chosen to work careers that are, you know, somewhat significant in hours worked, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, 50 hours a week. Maybe they're a lawyer or something like that. And you would look at that and be like, okay, well, are you able to really love God and love his people if you're really working hard? Is that really predisposed to these things? And there may be a reality that even though it's not predisposed to those areas as much as another role would be, that person still has the same capacity and opportunity to love God and to love his people, even though maybe his life isn't as predisposed to those things as another opportunity would be.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts there? Does that line up?
I think so. Clayton, any thoughts as I continue to process what?
Well, I don't know.
Jonathan
I
said?
think you're just kind of reminding me of like what I was talking about a little bit of just what present reality do you find yourself in, you know, and you know our just the reality of family life is each day kind of looks different, you know, and growing in leadership and responsibility, your days and the way that you use your time look different, and the way that you lived your spiritual life and communed with God in college looks vastly different than it does now. And I think, you know, where we, you know, start to be judgmental of others or even critical of ourselves is kind of trying to compare things. Things need to look a certain way and to be a certain way, you know, all the time. And, you know, just trusting that, you know, that there's particular seasons or careers where things have to look different to know and to trust like, okay, this is just, you know, maybe I need to think about, do I need to start doing things differently? Or maybe I need to think about, you know, how do I just, you know, offer up my life as it is right now as a sacrifice to God and trust that he's going to do with the little, he's going to do a lot with the little things that I can give to him.
As we've kind of gone through this season of the podcast, we've had a lot of episodes that have a similar thread. You know, we talked about the role of vacation in life. We talked about kind of the hustle culture and what that means, and concepts that are certainly related. Maybe they're not the exact same thing, but there's kind of a narrative journey, I think, that we've been walking our listeners through the last, I don't know, month, 2 months or so. Is there a way that this aspect of calling plays into kind of some of the other things that we've talked about? So hustle culture, vacation, hard work, and like the value of excellence in work. How do these things kind of interact?
I think the thread that I'm seeing in a lot of these episodes as we keep talking about getting distracted from what God has put in front of you, right? Whether it's by chasing a calling, whether it's through the grind culture, whether it's, you know, by always wanting a vacation for my life. It's pretty much all different ways of saying like not fully entering into the reality that's in front of you that God has entrusted to you, and getting distracted from that for whatever reason. You know, that's the main thread that I'm seeing through all of these things is our calling, our, you know, not vocation. I can't think of the word, but our life, the most important thing in our life is love God, love your neighbor, you know, love your family. And that's it. And be present to reality in front of you.
Mm.
The word that was coming to mind for me was freedom. And just the freedom that we have as children of God. Like you said, Joe Michael, there's certain non-negotiables, you know, and, you know, the non-negotiables would be, frankly, you know, Sunday mass, you know, the church would say confession once a year, you know. I like, you know, we probably preferential to go more frequently than that. But, you know, there's certain freedoms that God allows us as his children. And I think, you know, a tendency for us is to just, you know, put an immense amount of pressure on ourselves, the pressure to perform, the pressure to achieve, the pressure to make the right decision. You know, and a lot of those things I think are driven by a sense of shame that I need to cover myself up. I need to hustle. You know, I want to consume a lot of things. You know, I want to make the right decision. It's just, you know, I think if I could describe a way that I feel like I've grown in the last 7 years, is I've grown in an immense amount of freedom and just trusting and believing that I'm a beloved son of God, and that he loves me, and he gives me the freedom to make my own decisions. And I go to him and I ask for direction, I ask for clarity, but even beyond that, I ask for an increased sense of hope. You know, I ask for an increase of faith, of just, God, like, help me to believe that you love me, that you're my Father, that you're present with me in my everyday life, and that, you know, you've given me the relationships and the tools that I need to be the leader that I want to be in my family, to excel, you know, in the workplace. And you've given me the human intellect and the reason to make right decisions. And I trust that if I make the wrong decision, that you're going to be there with me, you know? And so that's what, I mean, if anything to the listeners, it's just, you know, how is God inviting you to greater freedom, so that you're not, you know, just burdened by a sense of overwhelm, anxiety, shame. That God loves you as you are right now, and He's guiding you. And so to go to Him just in silent trust, and that, you know, even if you mess up, it's okay. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, I love that, and I think hopefully the value add that we're giving our listeners is to give them experiences and conversations about faith in action. To give them an experience of not just faith in a church, or faith in a song, or an old lady type of faith that doesn't really have any concrete practicals to it, but that we're having conversations about, what does faith look like in the real world? What does real life faith look like for a man in the midst of his obligations? And I think we've been having a ton of fun diving into those realities the last couple episodes. So as we finish up here, if you have been enjoying what you're hearing from the All In podcast, we ask you to please share this with a brother who needs holiness in his life. Maybe you guys can be on a journey together. Share these episodes with him. Make sure that you're liked, that you're subscribed, and that you are locked in to all things All In over the next couple of weeks. We have more incredible content coming straight to you on all of our platforms, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.